The rain in Manhattan did not fall. It drifted in a heavy, freezing mist that lacquered the towering glass facade of Fifth Avenue. It was 7:15 p.m., the exact hour when the city's elite shed their corporate armor and retreated into the warm, amber-lit sanctuaries of haute cuisine. Outside the grand entrance of L'Étoile, the neon sign buzzed with an expensive, soft white frequency, casting long, sharp shadows across the rain-slicked pavement. Inside that glass castle, the world was a masterpiece of old-world luxury. Crystal chandeliers dripped with pristine light, the faint, elegant chords of a live harp drifted through the air, and wealthy patrons clad in bespoke tuxedos and diamond silk gowns sipped $500 champagne. Standing just on the perimeter of that expensive light, right where the cold pavement met the polished marble steps, stood Marcus Cole and his 12-year-old daughter. Nia Marcus was a 45-year-old black man who looked as though he had been carved directly out of industrial iron. His shoulders were broad and heavy, permanently hardened by 3 decades of unforgiving manual labor. His skin was a deep weathered walnut, and his hands were thick, rough, and marked by dark, indelible lines of industrial grease embedded deep into the creases of his knuckles, the permanent signature of his life as an independent diesel mechanic at the rough Brooklyn shipyards. Tonight, he wore his absolute best, a generic off-the-rack navy blue suit purchased from a local department store. It was slightly too tight around his muscular chest, and the fabric lacked the fluid grace of the silk-blend garments inside, but it was clean. His black leather shoes had been polished 3 separate times before leaving their cramped apartment, yet they still bore the faint, stubborn scars of old work boots. Beside him, Nia looked like an absolute princess trapped in a monochrome world. Today was her 12th birthday. She wore a simple, beautifully vibrant bright yellow dress that Marcus had spent 3 weeks looking for, its hem brushing just above her ankles. Her dark, tight curls were pinned back with meticulous care, secured by a small, inexpensive plastic tiara she had saved her own pocket money for months to buy. She held a small, cheap clutch bag in her hands, her knuckles white as she watched the high society patrons glide past her. "Are you sure we can go in here, Dad?" Nia whispered. Her small fingers tightened around Marcus's rough, sandpaper palm. She looked through the massive glass windows, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and intense intimidation. "Everyone looks so shiny. Maybe we can just go to that diner near the docks? The one with the good milkshakes?" Marcus stopped at the base of the marble steps and knelt down on the damp concrete. He did not care that the wet ground stained the knees of his only good suit. He reached up, his massive, heavy fingers surprisingly gentle as he adjusted the plastic tiara on her head, ensuring it sat perfectly straight. When he looked at his daughter, the stern, weathered lines of his face melted away, replaced by an amber gaze of profound, unshakable love. "Nia, look at me," Marcus said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that carried the grounding weight of an anchor. "For 5 years, ever since the angels took your mother, it's just been the 2 of us. You've sat on that rusted metal stool in my garage, inhaling diesel fumes and helping me wash the black oil off my tools every single night without a single complaint. You earned your straight-A report card on a broken wooden desk while the radiators tore up the room. I promised you back then that when you turned 12, I would take you to the finest restaurant in this city. Your dad does not break his promises." He stood up, his massive frame straightening to its full 6'2" height. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a crisp, neatly folded piece of white paper, a confirmed reservation email he had secured 6 months in advance, a booking that had cost him half a month's hard labor in the freezing docks. "Walk with your head held high, baby girl," Marcus murmured, his voice laced with an untouchable dignity. "You don't look at the floor and you don't apologize to anyone for taking up space. You belong anywhere you choose to step. Now let's go celebrate." Nia looked up at him, the fear in her eyes instantly replaced by a deep, absolute pride. She nodded, her small chin lifting as she mimicked her father's posture. Together, hand in hand, the mechanic and the birthday girl walked up the marble steps, their generic shoes clicking against the stone. As they neared the massive gold-rimmed glass doors, a uniformed doorman stepped forward, his eyes instantly scanning Marcus's tight blazer and Nia's plastic tiara. The doorman did not smile. He did not pull the door open with the fluid hospitality he had shown the wealthy couple before them. Instead, his hand lingered heavily on the brass handle, his posture shifting into a cold, defensive barrier. The psychological wall of high society was already rising to greet them, and the battle for a little girl's dignity was about to begin in the coldest way possible. The heavy, gold-rimmed glass doors of L'Étoile did not open for Marcus and Nia. They had to push them open themselves. The moment they stepped across the threshold, the ambient temperature of the city seemed to drop from a freezing rain to an absolute, calculated frost. The rich, suffocating aroma of expensive truffle oil, aged oak, and $500 perfumes rolled over them like a wave. The soft, elegant chords of the live harp seemed to stutter for a microsecond as several heads turned from their candle-lit tables, their eyes lingering just a second too long on the bright yellow dress and the slightly tight, off-the-rack navy blue suit. At the center of the grand foyer stood the marble host podium, looking less like a greeting station and more like a judicial bench. Behind it stood Christian Vance, the maître d' of L'Étoile. Christian was a man who had turned arrogance into a finely tuned science. Dressed in a flawless midnight silk tuxedo with custom silver buttons, his hair slicked back with a precise, high-gloss pomade, he possessed the unsettling ability to judge a human being's net worth within a single fraction of a second. He didn't look at faces, he looked at seams, he looked at cuffs, he looked at the subtle, telltale scuffs on the leather of a shoe. As Marcus and Nia approached, Christian's eyes flicked downward. In less than a heartbeat, his internal ledger compiled the data. Generic polyester blend suit, unbranded black Oxfords with worn-down rubber heels, a cheap department store dress, and a plastic toy tiara. His posture, which had been fluid and welcoming to the foreign diplomat who had just walked in, instantly went rigid. His features smoothed out into a mask of pure clinical disdain. "Can I help you?" Christian asked. His voice did not carry the warmth of hospitality. It was an icy, flat barrier delivered with a Trich Thwang distance that was meant to make them feel invisible. He didn't look Marcus in the eye. Instead, he stared directly at the collar of Marcus's tight jacket, as if looking any higher would stain his vision. "Good evening," Marcus said. He kept his voice low, steady, and impeccably polite, refusing to match the man's hostility. He placed the neatly folded white piece of paper onto the slick marble surface of the podium. "Reservation for Cole, a party of 2 for 7:30 p.m. Christian didn't touch the paper. He didn't slide it toward himself, nor did he look down at the computer screen built into the marble. Instead, he picked up an expensive gold fountain pen resting on his ledger and used the very tip of the cap to slide the paper back toward Marcus, as if it were a contaminated biological sample. "We have no record of a Cole in our registry tonight," Christian said smoothly, lying with the practiced ease of a man who did this every weekend. "Furthermore, L'Étoile en Fosse a strict upscale dress code. We do not accommodate casual walk-ins from the outer boroughs. The dining room is fully committed for the next several weeks." "It isn't a walk-in," Marcus countered. His voice remained perfectly calm, but beneath his navy blazer, his broad shoulders squared. He did not pull the paper back. "Here is the confirmation number, digitally signed by your online booking manager 6 months ago. The deposit was fully processed. My daughter has been counting down the days to this for half a year. It's her birthday." Christian let out a soft, mocking scoff, a quiet sound that barely carried over the harp music but cut deeper than a knife. He leaned forward over the marble podium, dropping his voice into a cruel, confidential whisper meant only for Marcus's ears. "Listen to me very carefully, sir." Christian sneered, his eyes finally locking onto Marcus's with a venomous intensity. "Look around this room. The people sitting at these tables are international diplomats, real estate tycoons, and board members of the city's largest banking conglomerates. They pay an immense premium for exclusivity. They do not pay to eat their imported caviar next to a man who smells like a diesel garage and a child wearing a $5 toy from a gas station. There are several fast food establishments 3 blocks down under the subway line. I suggest you take the girl there before I am forced to have security remove you both for trespassing." Nia's hand began to tremble violently inside Marcus's grip. She looked down at her beautiful yellow dress, which had felt so magical when she put it on in their small apartment, but now felt like a badge of public humiliation. The bright, glittering chandeliers above suddenly felt too hot, too piercing. A heavy hot tear spilled over her eyelashes, rolling down her cheek and splashing onto the cheap fabric of her clutch bag. "Dad," Nia whispered, her voice breaking into a small, suffocating sob as she pulled at his sleeve. It's okay. Let's just go. I'm not hungry anymore. Let's go home. Christian smiled, a cold, victorious smirk of corporate satisfaction. He raised his hand, snapping his fingers twice toward the coat rack where two towering security guards dressed in black tactical suits were already stepping forward, their expressions completely blank as they prepared to physically eject the father and daughter into the freezing rain. But Marcus Cole did not move an inch. He stood completely still, rooted to the floor like a monolith of solid iron. Slowly, the polite, accommodating mechanic vanished. His amber eyes narrowed into a terrifyingly sharp, freezing glare that seemed to drain the light right out of Christian's face. A silent, absolute authority began to radiate from Marcus's towering 6'2" frame, an invisible, crushing weight that made the two approaching security guards suddenly halt in their tracks, their instincts screaming at them that they were stepping into the strike zone of an apex predator. You should have checked the name on your corporate operating license before you drew the line in the sand. Christian, Marcus said. His voice didn't rise, but it dropped into a low, terrifyingly quiet growl that vibrated through the marble podium itself. Without breaking eye contact, Marcus reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a sleek, matte black encrypted smartphone, a device completely devoid of commercial branding. He pressed a single speed dial button and held it to his ear. Julian, Marcus commanded into the receiver, his voice absolute. Open the secure corporate vault. We are executing a total structural audit of the hospitality division, kicking the hive at L'Etoile. Right now. Christian Vance didn't let the smile leave his face, though a tiny microscopic twitch began to pulse beneath his left eye. He adjusted the stiff silk of his bow tie with his manicured thumb, letting out a short, nasal laugh that was meant to reassure the wealthy patrons who had turned their heads to watch the commotion. Play your little telephone games on the sidewalk, mister, Christian whispered, his voice sharpening into a lethal blade of pure bureaucratic malice. He flicked his gold pen toward the glass doors. Guards, I said, remove them. They are disrupting the dining room. The two towering security guards stepped forward, their heavy boots squeaking faintly against the polished marble. The larger one reached out a thick, gloved hand, aiming directly for Marcus's shoulder. He never touched him. Before the guard's fingers could close around the cheap fabric of Marcus's navy blazer, the grand crystal chandeliers hanging from the gilded ceiling of L'Etoile suddenly gave a violent, rhythmic shudder. The brilliant white light blinked out for one terrifying second, plunging the entire five-star establishment into pitch-black darkness. A collective, aristocratic gasp rippled through the dining room. A heartbeat later, the emergency backup lights kicked in. But they didn't pulse with the warm, welcoming amber glow of the standard grid. Instead, a harsh, flashing crimson warning bar illuminated the room. The soft, elegant chords of the live harp died instantly as the central digital management system crashed. Every single touchscreen terminal at the waiters' stations turned pitch black, flashing a single line of encrypted white code. Critical override. Acquisition clearance, Alpha 01. What is happening? The POS system is completely unresponsive. A waiter panicked from across the room, staring at his dead screen. Before Christian could even formulate a thought, the heavy, carved oak double doors leading to the private executive offices at the back of the restaurant were thrown open with such violent kinetic force that they slammed against the dry wall. Monsieur Dupont, the executive general manager of the entire Vanguard Hospitality Group, ran out into the main dining room. He wasn't walking, he was sprinting. His silk tie was violently askew. His hair, usually immaculate, was disheveled, and his face was entirely devoid of color, looking like a ghost trapped in a tuxedo. His hands shook so violently that he nearly tripped over the train of a wealthy patron's diamond dress as he tore through the center aisle. "Christian!" Dupont screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, breathless screech that echoed off the high ceilings. "Who is at the door? Who just executed the Alpha override?" Christian blinked, completely paralyzed by the sudden, terrifying breakdown of his superior. "Sir? Sir, calm down. It's nobody. Just a generic independent worker from the docks and his kid trying to fake a reservation. I've already handled it. The guards are throwing them outright." Dupont didn't let him finish the sentence. Moving with a desperate, wild velocity, the older manager drove his entire weight forward, shoving Christian aside with such immense force that the maitre d' stumbled backward. his hips smashing hard against the sharp edge of the marble podium. Christian gasped in pain, but the words died in his throat as he watched what Monsieur Dupont did next. The elite executive general manager, a man who routinely rubbed shoulders with billionaires, politicians, and Hollywood royalty, dropped straight to his knees on the Persian rug. He didn't care about his $1,000 trousers. He didn't care that the entire high society crowd of Manhattan was staring at him in utter jaw-dropping disbelief. Dupont bowed his head so low his forehead nearly touched the scuffed leather of Marcus Cole's department store shoes. "Mr. Cole?" Dupont gasped, his chest heaving as he swallowed hard, trying to force words past the pure terror clogging his throat. We did not receive the secure internal notification from the corporate headquarters. The system update. The board of directors. Oh God, please forgive us, sir. I swear on my life we did not know you were coming to a regional branch tonight." The entire restaurant went completely suffocatingly silent. The live harpist sat frozen, her fingers suspended over the strings. Diplomats and real estate tycoons stopped chewing, their silver forks hovering mid-air as a wave of cold realization washed over the room. The man they had all silently judged as a low-class drifter, a man whose presence they thought would stain their dining experience, was being kneeled to by the most powerful hospitality director in the city. Christian Vance felt the blood completely freeze in his veins. His jaw hung open, his eyes wide and vacant, as his brain desperately tried to assemble the pieces of a puzzle that was about to destroy his life. Marcus Cole. The name didn't belong to a diesel mechanic from Brooklyn. Marcus Cole was the legendary ultra-secretive phantom billionaire founder of Vanguard Global Holdings, the massive, multinational private equity firm that had quietly purchased L'Étoile and the entire luxury block of Fifth Avenue 3 months ago in a silent, multi-billion-dollar cash acquisition. He didn't just have a reservation. He owned the building. He owned the land beneath it. He owned the chandeliers, the marble, the silver, and every single grain of imported caviar in the kitchen. He was the ultimate sovereign of their entire corporate world. Marcus didn't look down at Dupont. His expression remained as still and cold as stone. He slowly reached down with his massive, grease-stained hand, his fingers unbelievably gentle as he wiped a stray tear from Nia's cheek, lifting her chin until she was looking at the room with her head held high. "Julian," Marcus spoke into his matte black smartphone, his deep baritone cutting through the dead silence of the restaurant like a chainsaw. "Cancel the acquisition buffer. Initiate a total structural liquidation of L'Étoile Hospitality Management, effective this very second." Marcus slipped the matte black smartphone back into his inner jacket pocket. He stepped slowly behind the marble-host podium, his towering frame casting a massive shadow across the crimson-lit foyer. He didn't look like a defensive laborer anymore. His presence vibrated with an untouchable, absolute sovereignty. He picked up the expensive gold fountain pen Christian had used to slide his paperwork away, spinning it casually between his thick, calloused fingers. "Christian," Marcus said. His voice was dangerously calm, a low rumble that felt like the gathering pressure before an earthquake. "You told me that the people in this room pay an immense premium for exclusivity. You told my daughter that she doesn't belong here because of the yellow of her dress and the smell of my tools." Sir, Mr. Cole." "Please," Christian stammered. He was backing away against the marble wall, his hands clawing at the stone as if trying to shrink into the masonry. His flawless silk tuxedo now looked like a costume worn by a terrified child. I was enforcing the standard guest profile. I was protecting the atmosphere of your establishment, sir. If I had known,